Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to Live Real Talk. I'm your host Faisal Kassim, and this afternoon we are talking about the Palestinian struggle, a conflict that dates back to 1948. We are talking about the year when this is according to an article published by the A&E television networks in 2017 and the latest edition coming out in 21st October 2019. The first proposal to petition the country, talk about Palestine, came way back in 1947, whereby the United Nations proposed that the Palestine to be divided into two, that is the independent state of Arabs and Jews respectively. A move that was vehemently opposed by, of course, the Arab nations then, including Palestine, Yemen, Syria, Jordan, and the likes. In 1948, May, at least 700,000 Palestinians were displaced from their homes to create spaces for the Jews. And this unfortunate event paved way for the illegal entry and occupation and marked the beginning of an unending war between the Arabs and the Jewish. There have been many outfits and historical events ever since, including the infamous Six-Day War between the Palestine and the Israelis that started in June 5th and ended in June 10th, 1967, that saw Israel occupy the Gaza Strip, West Bank, Sinai Peninsula, and the Golan Heights. Various engagements and peace outfits followed subsequently, including the Intifada 1 and 2 and the Oslo Peace Accord 1 and 2, way up until 2005, where the Israeli army exited the Gaza Strip. Fast forward to 2020, and the Israeli government is determined to annex to at least a third of the West Bank of the Jordan and the Jordan Valley, a move that's once again vehemently opposed by the greater majority of the world's population, and the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Michelle Bachelet, terming it as illegal and a dangerous path to take. What's happening now? How can we help the Palestinians get justice? Do the African voices have an impact to begin with? A lot of questions lingering with a lot of unanswered answers that we are going to try and address some of these questions this afternoon. Joining me to talk about this is Palestinian Ambassador to Kenya, His Excellency Hazem Shabat. Assalamu alaikum, His Excellency.
Alaikum salam.
Thank you so much for making time for joining us this afternoon. Mr. Kenne, Mwikya, a human rights lawyer and the Secretary of the Kenya-Palestine Solidarity Movement.
Mheshimiwa, karibu sana.
Thank you. Thank you so much for thanks so much for making time this afternoon. And we are having Dr. Clint, the Director of Postgraduate Theology Development Program and a Senior Lecturer in University of KwaZulu in Natal, South Africa. Good afternoon, Dr. Daktari.
Good afternoon. It's wonderful to be here. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Now, going straight into it, I'm going to ask you, His Excellency Shabat, what's the current situation in Palestine as we speak? Would you mind painting for us a picture? Because this annexation that was expected to happen in July 2020 and the Israeli government was so determined to move on with it. What's the current picture as we speak, being the 3rd of July 2020?
Yes, the annexation plan still exists and it's in place and it's part and parcel of the current Israeli government coalition agreement. It has been declared and both sides of the coalition have adhered themselves to implementing it. So whether it has taken part on the 1st of July or not, this does not make it any less dangerous or any less a reality. When Israel will decide to go forward with this plan is a matter of time, and this is only something that they would decide on. What we are concerned here about is that we have to collectively stop this annexation from taking place if we are serious and if the international community is serious and if all the key players and partners and stakeholders are serious in speaking about a Palestinian-Israeli peace process or stability and in the Middle East.
So the annexation has not yet happened, right?
Yeah, on the ground it did not take place, but it's still part and parcel of the daily dialogue of the government of Israel.
It's part of the unfortunate plan.
Yes.
Exactly. What are the possible moves maybe that do you think, what do you think might have caused the Israeli government maybe not to move on with the plans as agreed?
No, there is nothing that has caused it. The annexation plan is another brick in a very big wall that the current Prime Minister Netanyahu has been adopting since he came into power. He explicitly has made it clear as part of his campaigns throughout since a decade ago that his efforts are directed towards ending any possibility for a Palestinian state and extending Israel's control on historical Palestine. He does not deny this, and at least we can give him credit for being honest on this.
Okay, thanks so much. Dr. Clint from South Africa, you founded an organization, Cry for Hope organization, in December 2019 to help address the over 50 years of illegal Israeli occupation in Gaza. Dr. Clint, please tell us more about this organization and how you operate and how you help the Palestinians to try and address the injustices against them.
Okay, so first of all, this document and this campaign by the name of Cry for Hope, which you can find on the internet at www.cryforhope.org, cryforhope.org. It's entitled Cry for Hope, a call to decisive action. And it's really addressed to the Christian community in particular, but not exclusively so. But it is recognizing that a major fundamental part of this assault, this conflict, this hostility, this genocide, these human rights violations, these war crimes against humanity, so much of it is undergirded by the ideological capital that the Christian community provides in the way that they read the Bible, in the way that they understand God, in the way that they understand God's mission in the world. And so we refer to this as Christian Zionism, just as you have it, different forms, religious and political and secular forms of Zionism. It is very strong within many Christian communities. So this document is really directed at the Christian community globally, with special emphasis on the global South. And it is highlighting the problem of Christian Zionism. It is highlighting the fact that the kind of God that we hear about from Christian Zionists is not the God of the Bible. This God is not a real estate agent. This God is not one who takes the sides of the oppressor and wants to wipe people out of their lands, and so on and so forth. And so it is an opportunity to call the Christian community to reflect on the very integrity of their faith, to say, what is our faith really all about? Is it really a life-denying faith that murders and violates and steals land from other people? Or is it a faith that is life-affirming and life-transforming, that advances justice, that advances peace, but a just peace, a peace based on justice, and not an empty, cheap kind of peace that just simply involves dialogue, as if all players around the negotiating table are on equal footing. There is just a long history of injustice, and unfortunately, so many in the Christian community are part of that problem, and therefore they need to be part of the solution, so to speak, in terms of moving forward. And this document therefore encourages the Christian community to read and to affirm and to sign it. And in that sense, it becomes a campaign, a global campaign that has just gone public. I'm one of many people that are involved in this project. I'm not, just to clarify, I'm not the founder of this or the brainchild behind this document, but I am part of that group of theologians who have been contributing to it.
So it's actually a movement that's ongoing in South Africa, right?
Correct. And, if I may say so, in 2009, so 10 years ago, and that was the significance of Cry for Hope being released or being drafted in December 2020. It's almost 10 years ago, or just over 10 years ago, that
December 2019, you mean, right?
Palestinian Christians released a document in December 2009, and this was called a Kairos document, and it was, in short, it was Palestinian Christians trying to breathe out, to cry out to the broader world, especially the broader Christian community, to say, we as Palestinian Christians, this is what is going on. It's not a religious war as we are made to think. It's about fellow brothers and sisters in the faith.
Interesting.
That you
and you
are
witnessed the stand of fasting in 2015 when you
Bible.
traveled down to Jerusalem. I'm going to ask you about that as we are going on with the show. Dr. Clint, thanks so much for your feedback. Mr. Kenne Mwikya, coming to you now, who is the Secretary of the Kenya-Palestine Solidarity Movement, correct?
Yes, yes.
Mr. For how long has your organization existed?
Well, our organization has existed for quite some time now. I think we started formalizing the kind of systems in place to set up the Kenya-Palestine Solidarity Movement around 2015, but we had been existing for quite some time before that. I think that the organization came from the need to have a concerted effort in support of Palestinian rights at the time. And I thought that it was, and we thought that it was a good opportunity for people to actually come out and, voice their support for Palestinian rights and for the Palestinian people.
Thank you so much for that. Mr. Kenne, even before we talk about the annexation and how your organization has been involved, what are some of your gains that you have met as an organization for as far as fighting for this struggle, the Palestinian freedom is concerned?
I think one of the main achievements that we've had is to kind of just raise the alarm on our country's role in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. I think that we have also raised awareness among Kenyans on the interconnected history between Palestine and Kenya, the shared history of colonialism and settler colonialism in particular, as well as the shared values between the Kenyan and the Palestinian people for justice, for peace, and for liberation of all peoples. And I think that's very important. We've run a lot of film festivals, awareness-raising campaigns, and to also kind of like raise a spotlight on Israeli apartheid and the complicity of certain sectors of, Kenyan society in, like the crimes of the Israeli government. So that has been one of our main achievements. I'm very proud of the work that the KPSM has done. We can be found on Twitter, Kenya Palestine, Kenya Palestine, and on Facebook, Kenya Palestine Solidarity Movement. And we're very, very proud, and we look forward to continuing working with the Palestinian people to kind of like see the resolution of this conflict and, justice and liberation for these people.
Thanks so much. His Excellency Ambassador, this is a situation that has been in existence for over 50 years right now. And I mean, talk about this situation right here in the country. It is sad to say that not so many people have been giving it a priority. His Excellency Ambassador. You can see right now the Israeli government is planning to annex the West Bank, at least 30% of the West Bank, and at least it's not making it to the headlines in the country. I mean, this struggle, it's like it has been left only to you and few individuals who are actually talking about it, the likes of Dr. Clint and Mr. Kenne Mwikya here. Do you at any given time feel that we have been abandoned in this struggle for freedom and liberation as a people?
No, I cannot say so. We have very close relations and dialogue that has always been going on between us and the Kenyan government, for example, in this sense. And the Kenyan position has been, not speaking on their behalf, but at least from our dialogues and what we have witnessed over the past decades, is a very strong position when it comes to upholding international law and the resolutions that have been adopted in the various international platforms and fora. So I cannot say that we are abandoned in any sense. Our friends of the Palestinian people, friends of the Palestinian struggle, and our supporters and solidarity movements extend on all continents and almost in every country. And it's always has been with the good efforts of these parliaments, parliamentarians, solidarity movements, activists, university professors like Dr. Clint and many more. We have been able to put the Israeli colonial aspirations at bay to some extent. Now, what makes such a move, the move of annexation, quite a remarkable thing, and that's why it's taking now back the headlines, is it's a game-changing move. It's not about the tactics of negotiating anymore. It's not about delaying the delivery on international law and the commitments that Israel has to do. It's about trying to strike a deadly blow to the peace process once and for all. Israel would like to put its arm and its hands on all the natural resources, water. We're speaking about the fertile area of this 30% is where the water and the fertile and the food basket basically of Palestine exists. So basically it's a deadly blow that they want to strike and end the dream of two-state solution, which we believe is the best solution, and we came to adopt it as part of an international consensus and an international compromise that we gave to the international community in this regard.
Thanks so much, Your Excellency. Before you go on a very short break again, Your Excellency, before you go on a very short break, I'm just going to ask you this last question. Right now, Kenya has secured its space as a non-permanent member of the UN Security Council. Do you think, have you held discussions rather the head of state to see how you can help, or rather how they can help, how Kenya as a country can help in trying to get justice for the Palestinian people?
Of course, there has been extensive discussions with the Kenyan government on this, and let me just be very brief on this and say that Kenya is very aware. It's following very closely all the developments that has been going on in Palestine and with regard to the Palestinian cause. So they're not a newcomer to this conflict. Actually, they have been a good follower, and their positions throughout the past decades stand witness to this. Again, by being a non-permanent member of the Security Council, we are sure that Kenya's heart will continue, that is in the right place, will continue to deliver in terms of upholding international law and something that Kenya has a very good record in, actually.
Thank you so much. A lot of feedback coming in on Facebook. And Nasri, thank you, thank you, HorizonTV Kenya, for having this discussion. And Nasri say Israeli regimes have been in Palestine land since 1948. How to discover? Thanks so much for having this discussion. What role can African states masses take to the Palestinian cause? Cry for Hope, an initiative says underscores the cross-religious nature of the Palestinian struggle. Ntukon Kosi said, thank you, Clint. How to discover, say, feedback from the awareness. Of course, that's a question addressed to you, Mr. Kenyan. We're going to talk about that once we come back after the break. So please do not go away. Keep texting 21951 is our SMS line. And on YouTube, Facebook, we are streaming live as well. Kindly text us, comment there, your comment at the comment section, and let's have this discussion. Don't you go away, because we're going to come back after this very short break.
We learn Quran, we learn Quran, we learn Quran, we learn Quran, we learn Hadith, we learn Hadith, we learn Hadith, we learn Hadith, we learn the duas, we learn the duas, we learn the duas, we learn the duas, we love a prophet, we love a prophet, we love a prophet, we love a prophet.
I'll be live every Tuesday from 10 to 11. Please remember to send in your videos, your WhatsApp videos while you're reading Quran.
Abu Najma with kids.
Thanks so much for keeping it HorizonTV. My name is Faisal Kassim, and this is the live real talk. We are talking about the illegal occupation of the Israeli government in the Palestinian state. Dr. Clint, all the way from South Africa, with the apparent racism that's happening, of course, we saw how it blew with the death of George Floyd in the United States of America. There is a lot of racism in the world, with the Africans being mostly on the receiving end. Do you think the voices of Africans will have any impact for as far as this struggle is concerned?
The voice of Africans have to have impact. And the voice of Africans are having an impact, because wherever we find ourselves, one of the great contributions we bring is to highlight issues of identity and of invalidation of who we are based on our race, based on our culture, based on our context in life. And so this, for me, is one of the strengths, one of the gifts that Africans are in the broader world. And so we were talking about intersectionality and how our struggles overlap. And this is an opportunity for those of us who care about overcoming racism, and who also care about the plight of the Palestinians and resisting apartheid Israel in all its forms. These things all come together, they all coalesce, and they all strengthen each other. And that's why one of the important things is for us all to consolidate our struggles, to see this intersectionality, to see this overlap, so that we can be stronger together and we don't reduce our activism to single issue activism, but there's a plurality of struggles that are being combined and fortified through our unity. Africans know that wherever they go, we experience racism in our own context, but abroad, and especially in apartheid Israel. You may even be a citizen of apartheid Israel, and originally from an African country, and you will experience racism. You will find that you're not in the same WhatsApp group as white colonial settlers from Russia or from South Africa or from the USA. And we have seen many, many examples of this play out, where Africans from Ethiopians to Nigerians to all different groups from Africa being chased out by these Israeli Zionist settlers, colonial settlers, who have no connection to the land, but claiming the land for themselves over the indigenous Palestinians and over even other Zionists who come and settle there, but are not as light-skinned as they are. So this is a very important issue. And the issue of Zionism is also picking up that this is a struggle around racism. When you talk about being a democracy, but a Jewish democracy, there's a tension there. There's something of a conundrum and a contradiction there. It's a racial system which discriminates against people who are not of the same ideo-religious tradition as you. And so if you are not Jewish in the apartheid Israeli sense of being Jewish, which is Zionist, then you are not going to enjoy equal status. You will be treated at the very best as second-class citizens. But Palestinians experience things way worse than that of being second-class citizens. They are pushed out of their land, and they are invalidated as if they don't exist and as if they haven't ever existed. One of the questions I was asked at the border, the Israeli border coming through Jordan, the questions I was asked, and when I said I was going to Palestine, one of the soldiers, who was of course fresh out of high school, looked at me with a puzzled face and said, "Palestine? What's that? We don't have a place called Palestine. Are you talking about the occupied territories?" So That's just one very basic, simple example of how the identity and the agency and the dignity of Palestinians are not just erased, but it's as if it was never there in the first place, in the way that Zionists, those with a Zionist lens, talk and treat Palestinians today.
Interesting enough that you've drawn some comparison between the struggle South Africa had to go through with what actually Palestine is going through right now, because there is this quote from Nelson Mandela. My producer is going to play it on your screen, and I quote, "We know too well that our freedom is incomplete without the freedom of the Palestinians." There is something that Nelson Madiba Mandela, who is known as the father of freedom in South Africa, once said. My producer is going to play it on the screen in not so much long while. Mr. Mumo, Mr. Kenne, Mwikya, sorry, Mr. Mwikya. The BDS movement, it's one of the movements that was seen to be quite effective in this country. And it took a spiral, it took a surge in 2016. And again, out of thin air, again, it disappeared. What happened to this BDS movement? Was it not effective enough, or what exactly was the problem with the BDS movement thing?
Well, I would contest the contention that, you know, BDS has not been effective.
Mm-hmm.
I think that, I mean, first of all, the boycott, divestment and sanction movement against Israel and settlement products and even certain Israeli products has continued apace, and it is a tactic that has been used by people because of the circumstances with which we find ourselves in the impasse that we have with the kind of like Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to stress that this is an nonviolent, it's an nonviolent tactic and strategy to hold Israel accountable for many offenses against the Palestinian people.
Okay.
And I would say that this is a very individualized choice that people make, and I think the fact that it's a choice that people kind of like make individually sometimes hides the fact that many people are making a choice not to buy settlement products, boycott certain products from Israel, divest from certain Israeli products, and also support sanctions against Israel for its crimes. And I think actually the point of sanctions is part of why BDS is very complicated in terms of its effects and impact, is because states have proven unwilling to actually hold the state of Israel accountable for its crimes through sanctions. Mm-hmm. Sanctions are some of the most effective methods of holding states accountable for its crimes. Mm-hmm. And I think as we contemplate the question of annexation at this time, sanctions should definitely be on the table. Sanctions against Israeli goods, Israeli products, also Israeli individuals who are involved in making this decision of annexation.
But
I would like to stress,
you've not created the awareness on the investing on some of these products as you did way back in 2016. I remember in 2015, sometimes back there again, there was a lot of information, a lot of awareness about the divesting, and the BDS whole thing was all over the place. Right now, even with this annexation plan, I mean, we are listening and watching less and less and less of that.
I think I should also, again, come back and challenge this contention in the sense that, first of all, again, BDS is a very personal choice that many people make individually. Mm-hmm. I think that, like even the way it's arranged, a boycott is very personal. It's something that an individual can make relatively easily. Okay. But divesting investments from Israeli banks, Israeli financial products, that becomes more complicated. And then when we start also talking about the question of sanctions, mm-hmm. where states and international organizations are making a decision to sanction a government, a state, and some of its entities, the more we move from B to D to S, it becomes more complicated. I think as the Kenya-Palestine Solidarity Movement, this is something that we are always looking at, and it's always something that we are contemplating. Mm-hmm. And if you engage with us on social media, there's information that exists on our own platforms to kind of like enable you to make the decision on whether boycott, divestment, and sanctions are actually like an approach that you favor. I would like like to state from the outset that, first of all, like boycott, divestment, and sanctions is an nonviolent tactic. It does not involve the use of arms. It's been likened to discrimination, which is totally unfair and, like also ludicrous to say that you are discriminating against certain products. I think that making a decision with your pocket, making a decision not to invest or not to put your money into certain products that have been linked to the oppression of the Palestinian people is a legitimate and moral choice, especially at a time where the options on the table are so limited. Okay. So once again, if you engage with us on the Kenya Palestine Twitter page and the KPSM Facebook page and all our other social medias, if you are engaging with us, even using email, we have all our contacts on our social media. We are definitely always looking out to provide as much information as possible to enable individuals, companies, and other entities, including the Kenyan government, on how to hold Israel accountable for what is basically almost 80 years of criminal activity against the Palestinian people.
Interesting that we've mentioned about the sanctions and the movement. His Excellency Ambassador, my question to you is that we have seen the Arab government, some of the Arab states coming out just to condemn the Israeli government for what they're doing in Palestine and all that. I mean, have you taken it a step further, talk of sanctions? That's one, the Arab states that are being fought of or have been part of the struggle. Talk of Syria, talk of Jordan, talk of basically the countries, the Arab states that are within the Strip. One, what exactly have they done in terms of addressing this historical injustice for as far as the illegal occupation is concerned? That's one. Secondly, the UN. I mean, you are a member of the UN. Can they veto that decision of that move of Israel to annex at least 30% of the West Bank?
Thank you for this question. And basically, if I'm going to start with the Arab positions, I think the Arab positions should never be in doubt. We have clear condemnation by the League of Arab States through its ministerial conferences. We have even the OIC, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. They have been very vocal, and the positions are very clear on this. They are totally against it. So basically, there is no doubt that we can really shed here. If we're speaking about the relations and the sanctions, the overwhelming majority of these countries do not have relations with Israel or are trade partners with Israel. So basically, they are not in the loop of imposing economic sanctions as such because they have no economic relations with Israel. But again, as my colleagues have said, and the issue of sanctions and boycotting is in the UN Charter. It's one of the measures on which countries are called upon to take such measures to bring a country into compliance to international law. So basically, we're not inventing the wheel here, and the BDS, which I really commend their efforts and for what they have done so far, and they're continuing on doing. It's as my colleagues have said, it's a very peaceful measure that is being taken, and it's delivering, and its scope should extend, and it does extend beyond the economic context into the cultural context and so forth. Academia and all these partners have also been very vocal and took positions in which they have boycotted Israeli institutions as a form of protest. Now, speaking about the UN, and so first of all, we're an observer member state, as you know, so we don't have a voting power in the United Nations. But again, we have a whole list of UN Security Council resolutions that clearly identifies the legal parameters of any solution to come. The occupied Palestinian territory is defined by UN Security Council resolutions. So any move by Israel on this territory, whether it's existing already, as in the form of the existing settlements, or something new that will take place, or expected to take place like the annexation, is illegal by international law, and the United Nations is very clear on this. Even the countries individually have been very clear on this. Europe has been very vocal on this. Voices from all over, all continents have been very clear on this. Any move by Israel cannot be recognized as a legal move. So the legal context we have in place, and it's not in doubt. What we are speaking about now, every country, every individual, every institution should do its part, just as we did collectively in bringing apartheid down in South Africa. It was not done by any means other than the collective effort from inside South Africa and the sacrifices that have been made by the South Africans, and from the support that they've been garnishing around the world. And I believe our collective effort is the one that is going to deliver. So I believe that the responsibility, of course, the legal responsibility mainly lies in the hands of states, but also individual players and institutions also have a lot to deliver in this regard.
Oh, thank you. Thanks so much, His Excellency the Ambassador. Dr. Clint, over and above spiritual matters, because from your organization, Cry for Hope and all that, you want to address these concern from the spiritual perspective. This issue has grown to be an economical and political issue. Have you tried and come up or propose economic or political solutions to this menace, to this illegal occupation of the Israeli government in Palestine?
So to build on what our fellow speakers have been saying already, BDS has been a key avenue to advance the struggle from the South African side and to be part of the broader global community, a global solidarity movement with the Palestinian cause for human dignity, human rights, and for holding apartheid Israel accountable under international law and so on. So boycott, divestment and sanctions is something that we know very well in South Africa. It is one of the key pillars that helped to break apartheid down. Apartheid did not fall because a former president from the apartheid regime suddenly had a change of heart and decided to change the course. They are very pragmatic, very practical, concrete factors that influences what an oppressor does and opens him or herself to. In South Africa, the country was basically bankrupt. And here was an opportunity to either lose it all or to save the wealth that people had achieved through exploitation of black people in South Africa and in all the forms of oppression that have occurred. There was an opportunity to still hold on to that wealth, but to compromise on the political power. And a major factor in putting pressure on that was the BDS movement worldwide. And that was a litmus test. For instance, in the 70s, that was a litmus test internationally of where you stood when it came to issues of justice. Were you part of BDS in terms of apartheid South Africa if you were living around the world? I have many colleagues and friends around the world who refer to that. This was like the issue of the time, the global issue of the time. Where do you stand? And you will, in a sense, I don't want to use the word prove it, but you will express it through participating in this non-violent movement of boycott, divestment, and sanctions. And in the same way today, this is a non-violent opportunity. Those who oppose the efforts that we make to be in solidarity with Palestinians like to remind us of violence and non-violence and all these things. And here we are carrying the struggle out in solidarity through BDS, and we get lots of criticism for that. But that is one of the most concrete things we can do worldwide to force the hand of the oppressors to stop doing what it is doing. One of the languages any oppressor or oppressive regime understands is the language of economics. And so we want an apartheid state such as Israel. We want it isolated. We want it a pariah. We want it irrelevant in the global community because it has made itself irrelevant in terms of not complying with international law. We talk about, in the literature, we talk about states of exception, such as the US and such as Israel. All of us in the global community have to participate in this global democratic project together the social contract. But certain states like Israel and the US are treated differently. They can literally get away with murder and war crimes.
Okay.
And so BDS has to be strengthened, and it's a great opportunity for civil society to play a role. Those in the political sphere can play a role, those in the academic sphere, those in civil society, those in media, in every facet of life together today. We all can play a role. We need to exercise this in the academic spaces. For instance, we had cases in South Africa where ties have been cut, partnerships have been cut with Israeli universities, because this is really where the ideological capital within apartheid Israel is manufactured and brainwashed into young people's minds, and they have benefits for studying at university. So the universities are a key target in terms of, we don't want to have any kind of partnership with institutions. Also culturally, in terms of the tourist dimension, and this is where so many Christians, especially Christians and religious people, get caught out, because they think they're going to this holy land where Jesus walked and all these wonderful things that we read about in the Bible, and they sit in air-conditioned buses. Their hosts are state-sponsored Israeli tourist agents, and so they don't get to see what is really going on. They don't see the apartheid that we talk about as Black South Africans who have been to apartheid Israel and seen it for ourselves, and which was way worse than what we ever experienced. They sit in air-conditioned buses to go over checkpoints. They don't stand. I did every morning from 2 o'clock, just so that they could get through by 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock to make it to their workplace, just a 10-minute drive away. They don't get to experience that, and so that's also part of the BDS campaign in terms of the cultural dimension, and then of course in the economic dimension. We don't want to do business with an apartheid state of Israel. We don't want to have any trading. We don't want to support the products. And that's not because we are anti-Jewish. That's not because we are xenophobic or we are racist. Yeah. It is just that, not in our name do we want to pay for. We are not going to pay for the occupation. We are not going to fund these war crimes. We are not going to fund these violations against basic human rights of Palestinians. Not in our name.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Dr. Clint, for that. Before I do a final round of parting shots in the interest of time, gentlemen, I have a request to all my guests this afternoon. We have overwhelming amount of feedback and questions on all our social media platforms, YouTube included. So please, if you could spare a few times, some questions are directed to you, Dr. Clint, others are directed to you, Mr. Mwikya, and others are directed to you, His Excellency Ambassador. So I'm going to request you kindly, we're going to try as well to go in and reply and answer some of these questions, because this is a global issue and it needs a global voice. So I'm just going to come to you, His Excellency Ambassador, and start with you. How do you think this one interesting comment coming from Dhulkifli Fuad asking how can he as an individual take part in this struggle and help the Palestine get justice?
First of all, by educating himself more on the conflict, understanding the dimension of the conflict, the history of the conflict, and educating others. Basically, this is the first tool that with which we can combat occupation and colonialism, by understanding and being aware of the dangers of colonialism and occupation and apartheid, and what does it do to the fabric of the societies, and to the tension that it creates between nations, and the dangers of that. I think this would be the first step that I would advise him to take.
Thanks so much. Some question to you, Mr. Mwikya.
I think, just as His Excellency the Ambassador has stated, I think educating yourself on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is very important. I would also like for many people to see the foreign policy dynamics that kind of like underpin the decisions that certain countries make on the issue when it comes to the issue of Palestine. Maybe educate yourself on the role that the government can play in kind of like ensuring that there's accountability for some of the offenses that Israel has committed. You know, like Kenya now has a lot of responsibility at the UN Security Council, for example. I would also say follow us on social media, follow Kenya Palestine on Twitter, Kenya Palestine Solidarity Movement. We always have like up-to-date information and ways to engage, but raising awareness amongst yourself and also talking to your family members about some of the assumptions that people make about the conflict, you know, some of also the assumptions that people make about how to address the conflict. That's very important to dispel certain myths about Israel and certain myths about Palestine. So self-education is a very, very important tactic, and then after that, taking concrete action to actually spread awareness to the people around you.
Someone wishes to understand some of the Palestinian products, the BDS movement. I mean, would you mind listing some of them, some of the most common ones, please? A viewer on YouTube, please. Sorry, Israeli products, sorry, in the spirit of BDS, because it's a discussion that has really picked up. So in the spirit of the divesting and economic boycott, they wish to understand, they wish to know some of the common Israeli products so that they can start boycotting immediately.
Well, I think that, you know, this is, it's very difficult to actually know what kind of products are being traded in Kenya. I think part of the problem as well is always that some of these goods are masked, you know, they're kind of like laundered through other countries. So the origin is very difficult to state. I think that, you know, like, again, the question of self-awareness is very important to actually go into, like, you know, the internet has a lot of resources. Sometimes they might not be legitimate, you know. I think BDSmovement.org has a lot of information to help you kind of like come to a decision on which products to boycott. I think that, you know, like always a safe place to start are settlement products. Any product that is made, you know, by an Israeli entity in the occupied Palestine territories, that is a no-go. That is actually engaging in the worst elements of occupation profiteering, whereby, you know, like an outside force is coming into like Palestine, you know, taking its resources, taking its wealth, using the labor of the Palestinian people, and then, you know, maximizing and also totalizing this profit to, like, you know, advance the occupation agenda. And also, you know, in the end, to also further the aims and goals of annexation. So, you know, BDSmovement.org is a very, very good place to start. I think, you know, PACBI.org also has a lot of information about, you know, cultural boycott, divestment, and sanctions. As His Excellency the Ambassador mentioned, BDS has an economic angle, but it also has a very kind of like cultural angle, you know, in terms of the arts, academia, and also sport. I think that if you're a Kenyan and, you know, you're a Christian, you have all these Christian beliefs, and you think that it is important for you as a matter of personal faith to travel to, you know, the present day Palestine and the occupied Palestinian territory, I think you should really sit down and ask yourself, how can I make this visit in a way that affirms the history of the Palestinian people, that sees the struggle of the Palestinian people towards justice and liberation? Because a lot of these trips are actually propaganda trips, like to Israel, where you are not shown the true face of occupation, the suffering of the Palestinian people. I mean, no one ever really even goes to places like Gaza, where there's incredible suffering. You know, an open-air prison where millions are imprisoned and are under these conditions of, you know, extreme oppression, impoverishment, and, you know, personally torture. It's a matter of torture. So, you know, educate yourself on online resources, and also know that there are certain things that are happening, like these cultural trips, that are a means of actually a propaganda trip that desensitizes you from, you know, truly seeing the suffering of the Palestinian people.
Okay, thanks so much. I'm just going to take a few seconds as well of your parting shot as we are wrapping up the show this afternoon. I'm going to start with you, Mr. Mwikya. Parting shot this afternoon.
Well, my parting shot is that in Kenya, we are not silent anymore on the question of Palestine. We have a shared history, we have shared values, and it is very important for us to contextualize the struggle for freedom, the struggle against settler colonialism in Kenya, with what is happening in Palestine. I think using that prism to think about what is happening in Palestine is very important and makes it much easier for you to understand what is the moral position, what is the position towards justice and human rights. I think that's very important. Raise awareness among yourselves and, you know, like yourself personally and the community around you on the Palestinian issue, and then use that information to take action. Action is possible. Follow us on Twitter, on Facebook, you know, using Kenya Palestine on Twitter and Kenya Palestine Solidarity Movement on Facebook. We are always happy to hear from you and to also provide advice on how to fight what is happening in Palestine and to our Palestinian siblings.
Thank you so much. Dr. Clint, I'm going to come to you before we get to His Excellency, the Ambassador of Palestine, for his parting shot. Dr. Clint.
Very quickly, thank you for this conversation. Again, the website, which will have many resources and ideas, is cryforhope.org, and also a wonderfully resourceful website that has so many documents relevant to Christians and churches is palestineportal.org, palestineportal.org, and you'll also be able to read about the Palestine Kairos document. And one just small point to mention, a major myth or misunderstanding within the Christian community is that when we read the Bible and we come across the word Israel, the biblical Israel is not the same as the modern nation state of Israel. These are two totally different things. So when you read Israel in the Bible, it means different things. Sometimes it refers to someone's name, sometimes it refers to a territory, sometimes it refers to the people of God, but it's not the same as the modern nation state. And if we can get that distinction right, we won't end up in the dangerous trouble that we end up where we are justifying oppressive regimes like Israel. And when you read Israelites in the Bible, it's not the same as Israelis today. Two totally different things. If there's just that we can do, that will be great. And most of all, go and meet with Palestinians, go and see what is happening, read books by Palestinians, of how they read the Bible and so on. These are our ancestors. We have descended from them as Christians and churches.
Thank you so much, Dr. Clinton. Now, finally, His Excellency, His Excellency, the Ambassador of Palestine. Please, your parting shot this afternoon.
Thank you. My takeaway message would be reaffirming what my colleagues have said. This is not a religious conflict. It has never been. Regardless of what the Israeli occupation regime has been trying to advocate for a long time. This is a colonial occupation. When Africa rose against colonialism and apartheid, it was not acting with religious background. It's a matter of self-determination, human rights, and international law. So I believe we are all responsible in this sense, and we are equally have duties to deliver in this regard. And as an African citizen, I would have an extra or additional relation to this conflict and should be more engaged in seeing that apartheid is not reincarnated on the very first soil outside of African continent.
Well,
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Once again, my director got that poster from Nelson Madiba Mandela. If you can put that on the screen for you to read. And I quote once again, we know too well that our freedom is incomplete without the freedom of Palestinians. This is the freedom fighter of South Africa, Nelson Madiba Mandela. I mean, a lot of feedback coming on YouTube, especially. I'm just going to read some of them, and SMSs on 21951. I'm just going to read some of them. Israeli regimes have been stealing Palestinian land since 1948. That is Nasser. Out to discover. Zol, thank you so much for your responses. Thank you for this discussion. What role can African states play in masses to take the Palestinian cause? Ntukonkosi say thank you, Clint. Out to discover, say feedback from the awareness. Samuel Mushai say thanks for such a generous gesture of brotherhood. Although we are far away, but we feel you, Palestine. Now say you're right, Dr. Clint. You're right, Dr. Clint. The intersectionary of our struggle is an opportunity to strengthen our solidarity and collective strength. Dulkifli says, how does an individual help in this struggle? The Israeli regime is shown to disregard the international law and even its own commitment in agreements with the Palestinians. Appeasing them has obviously not worked. Nkuto Nkosi once again say, cry for home seeks to energize Africa, the whole world to say to occupation and not to annexation. It gives us an opportunity that we never had in the past to stop any form of colonialism. Again, a lot of feedback. So Mushai said it could have been very helpful to point out some of the Israeli products to boycott in our country so that whoever wants can boycott as well. As you've been directed, you can go to bds.com, right? Exactly. And then what does the PA envoy say about those Arab states that are calling for normalization with the Israeli regime and call for Palestinian submission to the Israeli demands at the expense of the Palestinians? Again, ladies and gentlemen, a lot of feedback coming that we could not go through all of them. But again, I've asked my beloved panelists before thanking them. Thank you so much. Starting with you, His Excellency, the Palestinian ambassador. Thanks so much. Dr. Wakili Mwikya, thank you so much. And Dr. Clint, all the way from South Africa, thanks so much for making time to have this amazing discussion. Let's keep up this conversation on our social media platforms. And on YouTube, of course, we're going to reply to your feedbacks, HorizonTV Kenya, on all platforms, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, and Instagram as well. You can engage us. I've been your host, Faisal Kassim, and this has been Live Real Talk. Thank you so much. See you next week, same place, same time. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.